so we can get busy in this joint, y'all, because y'all boy Joe Biden. Now, I know Joe Biden has talked a lot of shit since he's been president, and he talked a whole lot about how he was sorry for the crime bill of 1994 and how he's here for criminal justice reform and police accountability and blah, blah, blah. And you all, like me, like a lot of folks, knew that all that rhetoric was utter bullshit, right? We knew it was utter bullshit. And how has Joe Biden yet again demonstrated that he is pro cop, pro carceral, and ultimately a Republican at the end of the day? Not that there's too much differences between Democrats and Republicans. We've gone over this here on this channel. Basically, the only difference between Democrats and Republicans is abortion. After that, it's nothing. It's nada. How did I get off the channel? And how is this playing itself out today? Well, it's playing itself out in a very specific way with a bill called the Revised Criminal Code Act. Okay, Washington D.C., as most of you know, is only a semi-autonomous place, meaning that all laws passed by D.C., its city council, signed into law by its mayor, are eligible for review by Congress because DC does not totally have home rule. And I'm sure if you have passed through the Washington area, you have seen those license plates that say DC or Washington, DC, no taxation without representation. And what does that mean? So, Washington, DC has a delegate Eleanor Holmes Norton, but she does not actually have voting powers within the House of Representatives. She just did. Okay, I mean, no disrespect to Delegate Norton, but at the end of the day, she don't vote on shit, right? I mean, it's just what it is. And because of that, when DC does progressive things, oftentimes, I won't say often, but there has been moments in the past where these things will get shut down by Congress. One example happened in 2011. Who was president in 2011? Oh, yeah, y'all's boy, Barack Hussein Obama. Washington, D.C., in their budget, had allotted for its funds to be used to help women seek abortion services. And because Congress is Congress and because the Democrats are who they are always getting bullied to the right by the right. Obama stepped in 2011 to say that Washington, the city of DC, could not use its own money to provide abortion services to its own residents. Funny how that works. Isn't that funny how the Democrats seem to capitulate to the Republicans when it's some shit that the Republicans get excited about? And this particular bill passed by the DC City Council last year is exactly that. So the Revised Criminal Code Act, what it does is to help reduce some of the penalties for a lot of different crimes within the Washington, D.C. criminal code. The D.C. criminal code has not been updated since 1901. 1091. Oh, so 01. 1001, right? 91. Lord have mercy. 1901. Yes. 1901, gang. How do you think life was for the Negroes in 1901? Even in the lovely Washington, D.C., Black people did not have the right to vote in 1901. Women did not have the right to vote in 1901. The Washington, D.C. criminal code has not been updated since then. Okay. And a lot of times, people who are arrested for crimes and face trial for crimes in D.C., it's a very confounding, confusing sort of experience because a lot of these laws are very vague. They're worded very wildly, and it gives prosecutors and judges a lot of discretion in how to sentence people. Okay, so the DC City Council last fall, after a 10-year public input process and examination process, they actually created a commission. The DC city government did. They created a commission to review the DC criminal code and had many years of public testimony, public hearings, experts weighing in on this. And they came up with this revised criminal code that the DC City Council passed overwhelmingly last fall. The Democratic mayor, Muriel Bowser, Muriel vetoed the shit. Muriel said, we cannot have lesser penalties for carjacking. Okay. So Muriel vetoed the shit. But guess what? The DC City Council overrode her veto. And after that, this is when the federal interference began because congressional Republicans began talking that shit. They've been talking that shit. Oh, well, you guys are going to reduce the maximum penalties for violent crimes. Oh, that's just going to make DC residents less safe. Duh, duh, duh. This is all part of the. Oh, shit. Somebody read us some money. That's all part of this pro crime rhetoric, which is basically pro police rhetoric. Hey, Ursula. Thank you. Thank you, sis. Thank you, baby girl. Thank you so much for that super chat support, Ursula. Y'all know that joint, the Cash App alert be distracting and shit. I'm like, what is that? What's going on? So this is where we are at today. I want you to pop up that tweet from y'all's president, Joey B, Jim Crow Joe. You know, I was thinking today how corny the right is, and we know that the white rights are the corniest of the corniest, right? Because you know they bite everything else. They tried to bite woke and then distort and manipulate the term woke. And then they came up with the Let's Go Brandon. I'm like, why don't y'all cowards just say fuck Joe Biden? You talking about some Let's Go Brandon. I just say fuck Joe Biden or Jim Crow Joe. And see, Jim Crow Joe was right there in the corny white rights or the right whites, however you want to phrase it. Them corny motherfuckers, they didn't even want to bite Jim Crow Joe because at the end of the day, they support Jim Crow, right? We had a name ready for y'all to bite, and y'all failed to bite it because y'all's corny, as I said. Anyway, so speaking of corny motherfuckers, here's the president, Joe Biden, tweeted this today. He said, I support DC statehood and home rule, but I don't support some of the changes to the DC, some of the changes the DC Council put forward over the mayor's objections, such as lowering penalties for carjackings. If the Senate votes to overturn what the DC City Council did, I'll sign it. I'm sorry, what? What? Do y'all hear? Did you hear how many times Joe Biden contradicted himself within one tweet? Sir, how did you contradict yourself with using so few characters? Like, what? How can you support DC statehood and home rule at the same time override and side with the Republicans, by the way, to override the will of the people? Okay, let's be clear here. When I say that the revised Criminal Code Act passed the DC City Council not once but twice, it did. It passed overwhelmingly both times, okay? The DC City Council is elected by whom? DC voters. And when looking at polling among city residents about updating and revising the city's criminal code, it passes overwhelmingly with 83% support. So 83%, according to the ACLU of DC, 83% of city residents approve updating this criminal code. Because what lots of studies and data has indicated going back decades is that continuing to lock people up is no deterrent for violent crime. Threatening to send people to jail does not dissuade them from committing crimes. Because at the end of the day, if a lot of these crimes are driven by hunger and by need, you know, most Def said, many steal for sport, but more still to eat out here. You know what I mean? So unless you address the root issues of poverty, lack of housing, lack of education, lack of healthcare, lack of political education, we could throw that in there as well. The poverty is going to persist, ergo the crimes are going to persist. And again, crime to me is a subjective term because it's usually the ruling class that gets to dictate crime and all that shit. So here's Joe Biden saying that he is going to side with House Republicans, which have already passed the resolution that would prevent this revised um criminal code act from going into effect. And it's pretty infuriating. So there's a couple of things I want you guys to check out, because why is this important? To me, this is important on a couple of levels. First of all, make no mistake, we have no political allies. We have no one elected federally that is going to do anything significant to get the police off of our necks and to get them out of our neighborhoods, and to do anything that's going to hold the institution of police in any way accountable that is meaningful. Okay, it's just not going to happen. um and you need to know that. I mean, oh, well, first of all, I know y'all know that. I know y'all know that. But a leopard doesn't change its spots. 1994 crime bill Joe Biden is the same Joe Biden that occupies the White House today. This guy has no problem with using jails and building more jails and prosecuting people to the hilt over anything, big, small, don't matter. He is okay with jail as a solution to poverty. Okay. And as are the Democrats. And it's stunning, though not surprising. But again, it continues to at least make me smile and cackle a little bit, to prevent myself from screaming like a banshee and falling on the floor sobbing at the political ineptitude that is deliberate and intentional at this point on behalf of the Democrats. Anytime, especially when it comes to the issue of crime, Democrats won't miss an opportunity to fall over themselves to get to the right of Republicans. They have been doing it my entire life. That's what the 94 crime bill to me was all about. I said this week on the Remix Morning Show. It was me and Kamal, and I'm like, dog, the rhetoric I'm hearing about crime, about quote unquote violent crime, about property crime, this is pre 1994 crime bill levels of rhetoric. They are going to start locking if you, I mean, not to say that they have stopped locking black people up. They are going to restart that carceral machine, getting back to the mid 1990s levels. And I'm telling you, Tyler, my son, baby, you be glad you wasn't here for that. Be glad you wasn't around for that, because it was terrible. They were just locking up brothers left and right for any and everything. And Joe Biden was the architect behind a lot of that. He was the mastermind behind a lot of that. He was very proud of the job that he did, putting 2 million people behind jail, 2 million people in this country behind bars, with a majority of them being black and brown. And the way that we have seen policing continue to go since then does not give us any indication that any sort of racial equity, by the way that law enforcement does its job, that has not been achieved here. You know, black people and brown people are still overwhelmingly the targets of law enforcement, and those are the ones that end up filling up the jails. And the residents of DC understand this. The DC City Council understood this. Again, when studying, they first of all, they didn't just pass the shorthand for the revised Criminal Code Act is RCCA, right? So they didn't just pass the RCCA. The way that it's being framed by both the White House and the GOP is that this was some far left radical, not thought out policy that the out of control progressives that operate the DC government just decided to enact. That's not the case at all. Like I said, this was over 10 years of study and testimony and very careful deliberation to how the DC City Council arrived to this bill. So I want us to listen to a couple of clips. First, let's hear from the White House. Let's hear from y'all girl, Corrine JeanPierre. Every time, I just all I can do is just shake my head. Sis. Mm, mm, mm. So let's hear from Corinne JeanPierre real quick, because she was asked about this yesterday and today. And the reason I'm going to play today's clip over yesterday's clip is because I like the question that the reporter asked. And unfortunately, I don't know which reporter asked this question, but I was glad to hear the question presented in the way that it was. Because at the end of the day, what Joe Biden is siding with the Republicans to do is to undermine the autonomy of DC voters, okay? Period, point blank. That's all it is. And for him to sit there and talk out of both sides of his neck, out of one side, say that he agrees with DC statehood and he agrees with DC home rule, at the same time, he is usurping the will of city residents and city voters, is peak hypocrisy, but it's very on brand for these moderate slash centrist slash ultimately Republican Democrats. These Democrats will side up with the Republicans. See, this is what the fuck they mean by reaching across the aisle. When Democrats say they're going to reach across the aisle to Republicans, they mean that they're going to reach across the aisle to fuck over black people and working people of this country. That's exactly what that means. I haven't seen it mean anything else. I haven't seen it mean anything else. So if you don't believe me, let's check out I'm not gonna call her sister Corrine because she ain't my sister. You can't be my sister and be a fucking mouthpiece for the empire, least of all be a mouthpiece for Jim Crow Joe of all niggas. So anyway, let's check out what Corrine JeanPierre said at the White House press briefing about the president siding with Republicans to go against the will of Washington voters.
The president just tweeted a couple maybe 2 minutes ago regarding the DC home rule, saying he would sign the resolutions that should be passed the Senate to overturn the changes to DC's criminal code. The president's spoken a bit about his support for DC state in the past, but why does he believe that he should step in where the residents of DC's elected representatives, pass these changes? Why does he believe that he should substitute his wisdom and judgment for theirs?
So look, I mean, just to double down and triple down on what the president has said for decades, which is that he believes every city should have the right to self-government. That is still is the same case. That hasn't changed anything. He has long believed that DC statehood should be something that the residents of DC should be allowed. Again, that hasn't changed. But this is different. The way that we see this is it's very different. This is the DC Council put changes forward over the mayor's objections, and the president doesn't support changes like lowering penalties for carjacking. So this piece is different, but again, it doesn't change the administration strongly supporting H.R. 51, which would have made D.C. the 51st state. That is something that he still very much supports, and we're going to continue to call on Congress to provide a swift and orderly transition to statehood for the people who live here in D.C.
I was hoping you could explain a little bit why this is different, just because it's different. The president believes that every city should have the right to self-government, except if he disagrees with the outcomes of their governing process.
Look, one thing that the president believes in is making sure that the streets in America and communities across the country are safe. That includes D.C. That does not change. That's why he puts forward a historic piece, a historical plan that he hopes Republicans in Congress would support, which is his Safer America plan. That is something that the president has led. When you think about keeping communities safe, when you think about making sure that we're also protecting our law enforcement and making sure that we have law enforcement in communities that continue to keep communities safe, that's something that he has led on. So when it comes to what this proposal brings forth, which is, really lowering penalties for carjacking, he doesn't believe that's going to keep our community safe. So if the bill comes, he's going to take action, as he said.
The president does support statehood for Washington, D.C., but he just doesn't believe that the residents of D.C. know enough or are well-versed enough to know what is actually best for their communities. So he's going to kneecap them and not allow the will of their council and the voters to move forward on a piece of well-thought, well-crafted legislation that has been over 120 years in the making. Where are the shoes? How can I get a White House press pass? so like my man did in Iraq when he threw them shoes at George W. Bush, I must throw one of my Adidas slides right at Corrine JeanPierre's melon. Girl, what are you saying? First of all, you guys, what's wild about that whole statement about the whole Biden White House being these adamant supporters for DC statehood? Okay, let's say, for example, DC statehood were allowed to go through. And the reason why the GOP does not want DC to become a state very pragmatically is because it would allow two additional Democratic senators. This DC is a very progressive city. It's not a conservative. Well, it is conservative, but not like Missouri conservative. And of course, DC would elect Democratic representation, which is why the GOP opposes DC statehood. So in effect, Joe Biden is undercutting the will of his own would-be constituents, right? Residents of DC do get to vote, but for DC has electoral votes, right? I think DC does get electoral votes, regardless. Most often or not, DC goes for the Democratic presidential candidate. So, in effect, Joe Biden is undermining his own voters. He's undermining the will of people who are would-be Biden voters or who are would-be Democratic voters. And the racial dynamics here cannot be ignored because Washington, despite its tremendously high level of gentrification, DC is still a black city. It's still a majority black city. It's hanging on by a thread. it's hanging on by its fingernails on the ledge of tipping over to mostly non-black. But DC is still a very black place. And if it weren't such a black place, I believe that this type of criminal justice reform basically is what it is, would be allowed to pass. But because this is black folks, and Joe Biden is a cracker, and he's always stood with crackers with the likes of Robert Byrd and Strom Thurmond. Joe Biden longs for the days when he could kick it with the segregationists in the South and then go kick it with the segregationists in the North. like Joe Biden actually pines for the days when he used to kick it with his segregationist senatorial homeboys. And this is that. This is Joe Biden squadding up again with Mitch McConnell's, with the fucking Joe Manchins. Thank you so much for that. Who just ran us some bucks? I mean, this is that all over again. James, you already ran us some bucks, but James ran us big bucks this time. Thank you, James. Or it's different James. Or it's new James. Well, either way, the Jameses. We we thank you so much for your support. Thank you so much for your very generous Cash App donation. I want us to hear from the Republicans, guys, because I'm here to prove a point. Okay. And again, I love y'all to pieces because I know I'm totally preaching to the choir here, but sometimes we get wayward conservatives who, whilst meandering the YouTube streets, will make a hard left and somehow find themselves over here and are confused when I'm dropping elbows on Jim Crow Joe because I'm black and I guess I'm supposed to love Joe Biden. No, nigga, the fuck. Somebody has told y'all wrong. Somebody has led y'all totally astray. Have a seat, grab a seat, and we're gonna break this shit down. So thank y'all. Jesus. Look at God. Donnie. Thank you so much. Don, I had you in my list of thank yous. I got my thank yous coming up for everyone who has been supporting the fundraiser. Thank you, Don. Thank you so much for that. Will, pull up Steve Scalise's goofy ass. What's Steve Scalise, guys? Is he number 3 in Congress? I don't fucking know. It don't matter. It doesn't matter who he is. Steve Scalise. Junior Klansman. Actually, he might be a mid-level Klansman, somewhere in there. I want y'all to spot the differences, if you can, between what Corrine JeanPierre stood up at the White House press room and said, and what Steve Scalise, who likely, maybe, perhaps, I don't know this for a fact, I'm speculating here, but Steve Scalise strikes me as a man who might have burned a cross or two with his grandfather back in the day. So, spot the difference, if you could, between what Congressman Scalise had to say and what Corrine JeanPierre, Haitian woman, Haitian lady, who is the mouthpiece for the empire, what she had to say. Let's run that, Will.
In D.C., sexual abuse is up 157%. You would think you'd hear the other side joining us in speaking out against that, not trying to defend laws that make it easier to get criminals out of jail. Motor vehicle theft up 88%. Total property crime up 31%. Homicides increased 22%. We see stories of carjackings every day. And what did the D.C. Council do? They passed a resolution to get rid of mandatory minimums on many violent crimes. This isn't some petty crime we're talking about. Violent crimes. Armed carjackings. The mandatory minimum used to be 15 years for an armed carjacking, dropped to 0. Not a day you can hold somebody up at gunpoint and take their car from them, and you could literally walk out of jail the next day without serving a day in prison. And you wonder why crime is out of control.
I swear to God, the Republicans just be saying any fucking thing out here. Really, does that even follow logic by the ways in which our criminal justice system and our law enforcement apparatus work? Even if the DC City Council were socialist, the horrors of socialism, they ain't. But if they was, I assure you, they still would not agree to something like that. What they have done is lowered the maximum mandatory minimums. Mandatory minimums. That's very Clinton-esque, Clinton administration type verbiage there. But yeah, so listen, I have one more clip I want to play for you because we heard from Corrine JeanPierre, who clearly has no sense. Steve Scalise, obviously no sense, but I have found a white man with some sense. The white man has a smidge bit of sense. We're about to hear from DC City Councilman Phil Mendelson. And Phil Mendelson is a white man. I don't even think people would say that Phil Mendelson is the most progressive or even slightly radical member of the DC City Council. Not at all. But listen to the way in which Phil Mendelson, whom, by the way, supported the RCCA, listen to the way that he explains when he's speaking on the podcast DMV Download, which I think WTOP, a news station here, broadcasts. But he did a very good job of succinctly wrapping it up as to why the revision of the DC Criminal Code is needed and why it is not the boogeyman of the legislation that Republicans and now the democratically controlled White House is trying to make it out to be. Let's take a listen.
Do that. I'd love to hear why you think this new revised criminal code will actually, in fact, make the city safer.
I would say, I'm going to state it as a negative or positive. The criminal code will not make the city less safe. It will not make the city less safe. And that's because sentencing in itself does not have a deterrent effect on crime. And besides, the bill isn't fully... The bill's changes don't come into effect until 2025, and some of the provisions, such as the right to jury trial, don't become fully effective until 2030. So when we talk about safety and crime today, no impact. But when we talk about sentencing, the research is very clear. Sentencing is not what has a deterrent effect on crime. What does? It's swift and certain justice. When somebody commits a crime, they're caught quickly, they are prosecuted quickly and aggressively. That has a deterrent effect on crime. There's a lot of research about this.
And there's even more research that goes to show that when people have their basic human needs met, their survivalist needs met, their ability to eat, to be housed, to receive a quality education, that is a greater determinant of how bad or how good the crime rates are in a given area. Okay. The places that have the least amount of police usually have tremendous amount of resources in other areas, including their public schools, right? DC gives a lot of money to the cops. Okay. A lot of these youth driven crimes coincided with the pandemic when things were shut down, things were allegedly locked down, but a lot of access to spaces in which children and the youth were able to frequent were taken away. And it's taken time to get these spaces reopened. But in the interim, people have been dealing with tremendous economic hardships. They've been dealing with lost jobs. They've been dealing with, their service industry having a long time to sort of pick back up. All kinds of things have put these kids out in the streets. Okay. And a lot of times they just out here fucking around. Now, do some of these kids be wilding out? Yup, they do. And you know what I noticed? the police don't never seem to catch the kids pre-wilding out. They only catch the kids after the wilding out has already occurred. There is nothing preventative about increasing law enforcement. And even when it comes to these sentences, again, which the city council took a tremendous amount of time to study and review and to parse over the course of many years, what they found is even among youth offenders, threatening kids with 20, 30, 10, 5 years in jail doesn't deter them, because oftentimes they're not able to gauge those consequences, and the whatever is driving them to commit this quote unquote crime in the moment, they're not worried about what's coming after that. It doesn't make them necessarily bad people. It makes them people that you need to be presenting them with other options before crime is the one that they decide to do. And again, I hate even saying crime like that, because I just disagree with the way that the term crime is applied to a variety of things, especially when it comes to survival behaviors. So Joe Biden doesn't give a shit about DC statehood. Joe Biden is willing to use this very important issue that DC voters and the DC City Council have already decided upon. He's decided to use this as an election issue. We are pretty much on the precipice of the start of the election cycle for 2024 for the presidential election. So Joe Biden, in an effort to show that he is not soft on crime, is going to go against the will of his own constituents, of his own voters, to show the Republicans, basically, to show the GOP that he is not soft on crime. Where have I heard this horrific storyline play out before? If this is not giving me big retro 90s energy, when Bill Clinton and Al Gore and Joe Biden and the rest of them bitch ass niggas, when they wanted to show how much tougher they were on crime compared to the Republicans, they overdid it, right? They put 100,000 police officers on the streets. They built prisons at a record pace. They changed the laws to make sure that people remained in jail. Mandatory minimums, 3 strikes, sending people to jail for simple possession of marijuana or marijuana and other drugs. People who may have had addiction problems or addiction crises were not met with support and treatment. They were met with jail cells and punitive sentences. And the tone and the rhetoric of the Democrats, particularly of the White House, matching the chorus of nonsensical vitriol coming from the right, is giving me big 1992, 1993 vibes, and I don't like it. And I don't like it. And just to confirm to anyone who may have been a liberal or Democrat at some point, let this action by Joe Biden and other Democrats show you how deeply unserious and uncommitted the Democrats are, and Biden specifically is, to any sort of meaningful criminal justice reform. The way the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act just fell apart when it went to the Senate, because, them senators are not about to let cops be sued for excessive force and for murder by getting rid of qualified immunity. They're not about to do that. My guess is Tim Scott nor Cory Booker wanted that to happen either. So what happens to the Justice and Policing Act? It goes nowhere. But what continues to happen? Our people continue to get locked the fuck up, shot the fuck up, beat the fuck up. Lateef, thank you so much, Lateef, for your support. Lateef, big up to my mods. Big up to the mod love. Lateef, Court, and of course, the big bro Chuck Diesel. Thank you guys so much. Lateef, that's so kind and generous. And Lateef, you don't have to send us money. You support the channel all the time. Anyway, but thank you. I'm grateful. I'm grateful. So, Jim Crow Joe, where was I? Jim Crow Joe. Oh, yes, Jim Crow Joe. And the shame that Corrine JeanPierre should feel, even though I know she feels none. But can you imagine being a resident of DC, a Black resident of DC, and having to get up there and defend Joe Biden, just disregarding the will of your neighbors like it's nothing? I don't think Corrine JeanPierre is from here, but I'm sure she lives here. I'm sure she votes here. She may have even voted for a council person that voted for this shit, for not the shit. RCCA is not shit. I don't know. As criminal reform goes, it's something. And if the damn code hasn't been updated in 120 plus years, it's better than nothing. And at least it was done meaningfully with some serious thought behind it. And so I want to circle back something that Councilman Mendelson just said there in the interview on DMV Download. I mean, when he talks about what deters crime, swift prosecution, all that shit, yeah, whatever. But what deters crime is the shit I just said a couple of minutes ago. But when he talked about how the issue of sentencing has been well researched and studied, how come that is never brought up by Democrats in in Congress, or not never even brought up by the White House? It's like they are willing to ignore the fact that this issue has been studied significantly and thoroughly for many decades about whether or not punitive long criminal jail sentences do anything to dissuade violent crime. They don't. Like, this isn't even up for dispute. It's not even up for debate. Like, they don't do anything to stop people from committing these acts. So why do we keep trying to do the same thing over and over again? Joe Biden is happy to stand with the Republicans to basically uphold the status quo. I'm sorry, you trying to tell me an 80-year-old man wants to change things? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. That 80-year-old man wants the shit to stay exactly the same. And it's really shameful and repugnant and extremely telling that Joe Biden is going to abide by a criminal code that is over 100 years old, that is absolutely meant to target and extra punish black people more harshly than all others, when this city is still a majority black city. And it's a shame that the lives and outcomes of DC residents is being dictated by the GOP, and the Democrats just stand there and let it happen. They're not fighting for the voters of this city. They're not fighting for DC autonomy and the importance of home rule. They are rolling the fuck over and reaching across the aisle. They are reaching across the aisle to screw us over, and actually have justification for it, and are trying to defend it and talk out of both sides of their neck at the same time. It's like, we can see y'all. Like, we can totally hear you. You're not making any sense. It sounds like you're full of shit. Do you expect our vote in 2024? Because you're not gonna get it. Not signing off on bullshit like this. And make no mistake, once the population of DC officially flips over to majority white, all of this oversight is likely going to go away. When DC flips over to majority white and elects a white mayor for the first time in forever, maybe ever. When was the last time DC had a white mayor, Afra? It's been a very Anyway, I'll let the historians debate that facts, like I don't fucking know. But anyway, regardless, when DC gets a white mayor and the city becomes a majority white city, I'm telling you, all the congressional oversight, all that shit's gonna go away. Statehood is going to get passed the same year. The same year, the whites become 51.0% of the Washingtonian population. That's the same year statehood is gonna come in. Watch what I tell you. watch what I tell you. Watch what I tell you. But I want you guys, again, just to pay attention, because I know I talk a lot about local stories. I talk a lot about what goes on in Maryland, what goes on in DC. Because the shit is relevant. It's extremely relevant. And if anybody has any one in their circle, in their political sphere, that says, well, Joe Biden says that that police accountability is important, and that he understands the talk that black parents have to have with children. Oh, okay. Well, does he understand that maximum minimums of 15 years for carjacking for kids or offenders who are potentially 16 or 15 years old themselves? That's a detriment to the community. It does not benefit. It does not prevent any crime. It doesn't do anything to help the young people when they finally come back home. So there is that. But I just want you guys to pay attention to this struggle for autonomy. This is a racist war and a racist capitulation that the Biden administration is doing to assuage congressional Republicans. Again, the Democrats will always try to reach out to the right. They will never reach out to the left. Anytime they go, or some of them even consider offering up policies that go to the left, Democrats will join Republicans in screaming about socialism. It's preposterous. But we have to stop supporting, not to say any of us do, and I know some of us are places where we have to vote out of a sense of necessity and expediency, and I understand that. I do not live in such a place, so I wrote in Ghostface Killer for fucking for something. I wrote in myself for governor. I wrote in myself for senator. So I'm live in Maryland. I pretty much vote how I want, and I know that's not the case everywhere. But I said that to say, guys, we have to reconsider the ways in which we're going to put forth our votes, specifically in the presidential election, even if that means withholding our votes. And I don't know exactly how to punish Democrats and to make them understand that them continuing to reach out to the right. Why the fuck would anyone vote for Democrats when Democrats act like Republicans? You might as well vote fucking Republican. What is what is the point of even pretending to vote right? To vote. I can't even call Democrats left, to vote for Democrats, right? And I hate this, guys, but I want all of us to be aware of a couple of things. Like, I'm not going to be voting for Joe Biden in 2024. I don't give a fuck who's running against him, and I don't. What I do want us to do is start to prepare ourselves, our communities, our circles, our spaces. We have to prepare ourselves, I think, for a DeSantis administration. We really do. I really believe that the Republicans are going to recapture the White House because Joe Biden is, I have to say, I guess intentionally trying to hemorrhage would be Democratic voters by pulling shit like this, right? I think DeSantis is going to win in 2024. I think DeSantis is going to be worse than Trump ever could be. So I don't think that we should stop fighting Joe Biden, but in addition to fighting Joe Biden, we actually need to prepare for a worser outcome and scenario, and that would be a President Ron DeSantis. Because there's no way, ain't no fucking way. I'm gonna tell everybody not to vote for Joe Biden. Not that anyone listens to me anyway, but how can anyone vote for this as a person with our politics with a clear conscience? And again, I understand sometimes we got to vote certain places. Pennsylvania, I get it. Where else is one of them toss up states? Fucking Ohio sometimes. Wisconsin. I get it. I get it. I get it. It won't be me this time, though. It won't be me. And prepare for President DeSantis because he gonna be worse, sir, I suppose. Yes, he will be worse, sir. But this is pretty bad, and I don't agree with this at all.